Leadership Mastermind, session 6. And before I titled it this, I just have to let y'all know, I looked at my 17-year-old daughters and I said, did you guys know that accountability is not a 4-letter word? And believe it or not, they all did. So I think this is something we understand as kids. And as we get a little older, we might forget a little bit about it. We're like, but Jeff, accountability isn't a 4-letter word. And I was like, I get it. I understand. That's totally okay. And sometimes we treat it like it's a 4-letter word, and we're going to get into that today. We're going to talk about what a 4-letter word is first, and then second, we're going to start to talk about why we run from accountability and what we can do to feel better about it. So pay attention. Got a lot to cover today in the next 60 minutes. Before we get going, I want to introduce myself. I am Jeff Kuhn. I am one of the Cyberbacker Maryland franchise owners. I'm also a speaker, trainer, and coach for small businesses all across the world, honestly. International speaker, coach, and trainer. I have clients in many multiple countries, including right here in Maryland, where I live and work. So we service Maryland, DC, and Delaware, and our job here inside of Cyberbacker is really to help support small businesses locally in order to give them the opportunity to add leverage, add the business pieces that they need in order to continue to grow. So thanks for joining us today. And as we go, Shard, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Right. Hey everyone, I'm Shara. I'm actually working closely with Jeff. I'm the growth backer assigned here at Cyberbacker, Maryland. And what I do is to meet clients to help them figure out what is the best thing for them to do for the whole year for them to be able to hit their goal. Basically, I'm actually giving them a knowledge about the power of leverage, but more of really giving them the understanding of focusing on their one thing, right? So that's the thing. That is it for me. Thank you.
Love it. Thanks, Shar. And then we've got Irene here with new headshots. Boom.
Thank you
Irene,
so
why don't
much.
you
Hi,
tell us a little about
everyone.
yourself? Yeah.
So, my name is Irene. Part of the career team here in Cyberbacker, Maryland. So, as a career backer, I'm helping to find the right talents and partner them with the clients who share the same values. So, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. And hey, Tony, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Just so you know, this is intended to be a little bit more intimate. We only had 4 or 5 people tell us that they're coming, and a couple are running late. So you probably won't be the only one. And if I lean on you a little bit, I hope you're okay with that. Welcome back from Italy, by the way.
Thank you. I'll be here. Unfortunately, I have another meeting at 9:30, so
Okay.
I'll be here as long as I can.
No, absolutely. We're going to record this, and then we're also going to do a repeat session now that schools are back in session, and we'll start this back up again mid-September and run through the 8-week series again. So hopefully see you around for those as well. Great. So today we are, again, leaning into accountability. So accountability is not a 4-letter word. In fact, I don't know, it's at least a 10-letter word. But sometimes we treat it like it's a 4-letter word. And I think that's partially because there's 2 hard truths about accountability. The first one is what? Who wants to read that for me? Go ahead.
All right. At the end of the day, as leaders, we are responsible for everything that happens with our business.
Boom, right? I don't think there's anybody here that would disagree with that. At the end of the day, as the leaders of the business, as the owners of the business, or as managers of the business, we're responsible for everything that happens in the business. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. So we're on the same page there. Good. The second truth then is what?
Our people will win or lose based on how we lead.
That's right. Our people win or lose based on how well we lead. Now, this is where it starts to get a little controversial. We'll take it off of share here for a moment. We'll turn that back on in a minute. We're going to break this down a little bit more as we go, but I believe in having fun at work. You know, for those that don't know me very well, again, I started my career at Chuck E. Cheese for almost 10 years, moved into Hasbro selling board games for a living, and then EB Games and GameStop for another 10 years. And so I spent a lot of time in the game business, right? I actually just was working with a client recently on how he could gamify results, or gamify, depending on who you are and how you want to pronounce it, results inside of his business. How can he add points and give incentive prizes, make it more like a game as they're working to achieve. So I've always been big on having fun at work. And I realized that a lot of times sitting down to have one-on-one conversations with people didn't necessarily feel fun, right? that fair to everybody? It doesn't necessarily feel fun to have a one-on-one conversation. So what is it about a one-on-one conversation that doesn't feel fun?
Confrontation or something like
Right.
that.
Could be confrontation. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So awkward conversations about something. And usually what are those confrontational conversations about, Shara?
Let's say something happened at work and you're the one responsible for that one. Let's say a mistake or something's missing, negligence,
Yeah.
sort of things like that.
So here's an interesting question for you. So things need to improve. Yeah. So here's an interesting question for you. Do you think that the person that you're having that conversation with already knows that they messed up?
Probably.
Yes. Sometimes they don't see it where you see it.
Yeah.
So they may have a feeling, but they don't think they mess it up.
I think that's a perfect explanation. I think that's one of the reasons it's not fun, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're seeing something differently than they are, if they know they've messed up, that's easy conversation, right? It's like, hey, dude,
Yeah.
what happened? When they don't know that they've messed up and you know that you're about to get in there and have a conversation that's going to feel a little bit out of left field, right? Coming out of the blue, so to speak, it feels a little more awkward and a little bit more confrontational. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. And so that's really what this is going to be about. What I believe, what I've done over the years, and again, I learned this inside of Chuck E. Cheese originally. We called it the 3 C's. It was crystal clear communication. It was how well did we communicate in advance? How well are we communicating now? And how well are we holding up people and holding them accountable to the things that we've communicated, right? And so if we can provide all the correct communication each step along the way, help set people up. Sometimes still, Tony, we're going to come across a situation where you and I will define a word differently, right? What is the definition of is, right? What's the definition of the? An example I like to use a lot, Tony, think of a dog. Any dog out there, just think of a dog. Get it in your head. Irene, Shara, think of a dog. Get it in your head. I want you to think about the color of the dog, the size of the dog, the shape, the weight. Okay? Everybody got a dog in their head?
Got it.
All right. Yep. Tony, you first. What's your dog look like?
So it's a Labradoodle, gray, mid-size, 20, 30 pounds.
Okay, great. All right. Shara, how about yours?
It's a Labrador, a black one.
Okay.
Kind of like a large sized, maybe like 10 pounds or so.
Oh yeah, that conversion, isn't it? All right. Large size would probably be at least 50. All right. So anyway, Irene, what about your dog?
Like a teacup sized dog, a very small one, white collar one.
Irene likes to put her dog in her purse. We get it. Okay. I was also, by the way, I went back and forth real quick in my head between a Labrador, coincidentally, and a Labradoodle, coincidentally. I've got a chocolate lab and a rusty colored Labradoodle, a rusty brown type color with a little orange red in the hair. But both of mine are huge. The chocolate lab is 135 pounds and the Labradoodle is 110, right? So if a word like dog can create 4 different perceptions of you, what do you think the more complicated ideas, thoughts, processes, systems inside of business can create inside of our people, right? We just tell them something, but we don't understand their definition of it. We're going to have a lot harder time holding them accountable to something that they did according to what they thought was necessary versus what we thought, right? To your point, Tony, they saw something from a different way, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get back into it. What we're going to do today inside of this class and inside this workshop, and this is the reason we're doing this one this week. We've got a longer one next week that goes into something we'll bring up here at the end. And the next week one is not part of the Leadership Mastermind. That's open to anybody. So Tony, if you know other small businesses that need to learn how to have one-on-ones better with their people, that's next week. All right. Next Tuesday afternoon. So somebody read this quote from Hal Elrod for me.
All right, so the moment you take accountability for everything in your life is the moment you can change anything in your life. Hal Elrod.
Yeah. So as a territory director, I used to have arguments with my district managers all the time. This is, I think, where accountability really started to get real for me and for them. You know, I usually in an interview process, I usually tell people, you know, don't ever have a no. Like there can't be anything in an interview process that just flat out is a no. If it happens, they never even get a chance. Like, got to dig a little deeper. We got to have a discussion about most things. One of those is a great example is like a one-page resume. I know some managers that if the resume was one page, they don't think they put enough work into it. And I know other managers that if the resume wasn't one page, they thought they were being too wordy, right? So you hand somebody a 5-page resume, they're like, I'm out. You hand somebody a 1-page resume, they're like, I'm out. I'm like, no, let's talk to the person. Just because it's a resume style doesn't mean we should say no. But one thing I held true for a long time about interviews is if they did not come to the interview on time, reasonably on time, or at all, and asked to reschedule because of a transportation issue in any sort, don't hire them. Like, that was my one rule. And they're like, what do you mean? But what if they got in an accident? What if they got rear-ended at a stop sign? What if they this? What if they that? What if they came out and their car was towed? And for me, every one of those pieces lines up to mean what? What does that say about somebody if their car got towed right before a job interview?
Right, the lack of preparation, I guess. If you get towed the car, like means that you probably parked illegally or something like that.
Yeah, right. I mean, you did something wrong to set yourself up into a place that you weren't set up for success on the day it was most necessary to be successful, right? If I got rear-ended at a stop sign, traditionally that means I was rushing and I stopped short and somebody ran into the back of me, or I wasn't paying attention in some way, even if somebody else hit me. That as a offensive, defensive driver, traditionally I can avoid an accident because I'm being careful. I've given myself plenty of time to get places, right? It's when I'm rushing, when I'm running behind, when I'm not prepared, that those things start to happen, that my car doesn't start. I've had situations in interviews where a person came out and they had a on their car. Boot. That means they can't drive their car. And they still showed up to the interview on time, an hour away. I've got so many options these days. They call a friend, they call an Uber. You know what I mean? Like, there's things you can do if you're preparing and you're getting ahead of the game. And with my district managers, 100% of the time, I would tell them, hey, it's your choice. It's your team. It's your choice. Hire who you want. And red flag number one, they didn't show up on time or they asked to reschedule that interview, right? That means that they're not going to pour in the way that you're looking for a store manager to pour in inside of some of these locations we're running. And sure enough, if they ever offer them the job, they came back a couple of weeks later and they were like, you're right. My bad. I think we got to let such and such go. We're like 2 weeks in. Yeah. Okay. And again, the leader messed up. We have systems, we have processes in our interview process where we can determine if it's a good fit from the beginning. And if we bring somebody in that's not a good fit from the beginning, we're setting ourselves up for early failure inside of an accountability range. Does that make sense? All right.
It does.
So just from there alone, if no other reason, because as a leader hired an individual, if that individual does not succeed, that's on me. Okay, now moving forward, understanding this, like, what does that mean we need to be really careful and do inside of our business?
Self-accountable?
We need to hold ourselves accountable. Absolutely. That's a good one. We need to hire the right people. I kind of said that one already, right? Hire the right people, hold ourselves accountable, set up some systems and processes to make sure we're doing the right things. 100%, right? And so once we get them started, Tony, what do we need to keep doing?
Hold them accountable.
There we go. Set up a system and process to hold them accountable. And so again, if we're having a conversation with somebody that is awkward, it's usually because we understand that we're coming at things from a different perspective. And so if we know that we're coming at things from a different perspective, would you think it's better to have more frequent meetings or less frequent meetings?
It's a tough one. Definitely more.
Okay. And I like to compare this to, a plane crossing the United States. If I was taking off from BWI Airport here in Maryland and I was flying to California, how often do you think I'm checking my direction, my course? Even with an autopilot, how often do you think the autopilot is correcting the direction?
Probably a few times in seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like hundreds and hundreds of times an hour, right? Like, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's just slightly making modifications all the way on the trip. And a slight miscalculation of that trip coming from Maryland, going all the way to California, could land us in San Francisco or LA, right? Like, it's only like a 4% shift in direction from takeoff. 4% all the way across 2,500 miles could get us to San Francisco or LA, which are thousands of miles apart from each other, right? So the big question there, then again, like comes back to us, or 1,000 miles apart, maybe not thousands, comes back to how often are we keeping up and providing direction. So last week, we talked about developing a communication cadence and making sure that you had a communication cadence with your team. So how often would you be talking to them? How often would you be communicating? We asked and talked about what things should be communicated in what way. So that was the homework for anybody that came last week or watched it on video. If you haven't done that yet, you want to make sure that you go back and watch that one and create a communication cadence with your team, because that's a big part. Communication is a big part in making sure that we can hold people accountable. So if we set up a communication cadence with our team, then more likely than not, we've also set up some time to meet with the key people on our team weekly and have that one-on-one type conversation. And so if you are already having that one-on-one conversation on a scale of 1 to 5, how effective would you rate the conversation that you're having with people that are reporting to you directly? Okay, scale of 1 to 5. Everybody here can answer this, because I know all of you are working with other people that have to come back and report to you on things that are happening. So scale of 1 to 5, how do you rate that communication? Shara, you and I talked about this. I told you I was going to give out this special sheet this week at the end of the call, like a sheet that I've used for years. And I even said what to you? What did I say to you?
I believe that you'll send it after the mastermind.
Well, I said that you and I should probably have been using that sheet from the beginning. Like, we have a conversation that kind of follows this sheet a little bit, but we're not using the sheet. And I kind of kicked myself a little bit. I'm like, all my coaching clients are using this sheet. And I've been using this sheet since I was at Chuck E. Cheese 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever it was. Like, I don't know why I'm not using it with you. I mean, we have a check-in. We look over our activities. We have a scorecard that we're looking at, but we're not using this particular sheet. We'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end. But so even myself, I'd rate no higher than a 4, just because I know there's something I could be doing better to have a better weekly conversation with you, right? What about you?
Okay, is it like during our meeting or?
Or with 3 or anyone, right? Like, so.
Yeah, for me, let's say I'll give it sometimes it's a 3 with a team. Sometimes if ever, let's say, if it's not Irene, if it's not, people that I'm working closely with, I'm not gonna reply that to them right there and then. But if ever, let's say with Irene, I know for sure that both of us will always communicate effectively and efficiently as well. So basically, if there will be times that we need each other, we use Slack, and I think if ever, I'm gonna rate it a 5 or a 4 maybe. But yeah,
Okay.
I know for sure.
All right. Yeah. How about you, Tony?
I would say, I mean, I just got back, so I have an excuse there. But my last conversations, I would say probably a 3. I mean, I definitely never give it 5.
Yeah,
but
I'm kind of one of those guys too. It's rare I rate myself perfect on anything, even though I like to think that I am perfect. But my wife thinks I'm perfect. No, she's not. All right. Okay. So a 3. So if you could make it better, what would move you from a 3 to a 4?
I guess for me it would be a closer statement. I mean, giving them like a more like empowerment and a more clear reaction at the end. Sometimes, like, some meetings last very long. So like, especially when I came back, I'm referring it to the last one. We talked a lot of things, of course, because I was out for a while. So I guess at the end, I had the impression made things get lost a little bit.
Okay.
So was probably why giving myself a 3 for that one.
Yeah. I love the fact that you said empowerment, right? I think that's a big part about winning with your team, is giving them the autonomy to make a decision. I quote Henry Ford often, right? Hire the right people and then get out of their way, right? When we set them up for success and have the right conversations with them and give them the chance to be empowered to make a good decision aligned with you, then those conversations again go a lot easier. So this is a me thing, right? So I'm going to run these down for you. I think a lot of these are great business practices that everybody will agree with, and this is just something that I've come up with over the years as far as having the most effective weekly team conversations. Okay, So this can be with your team one-on-one or with your team as a whole. Both those conversations, in my mind, kind of follow the same trajectory. And so the first thing, we're going to go through each of these points, but the first one is
Your expectation discussed in advance.
there we go. The second one is, we all are familiar with these.
Mark goals established.
There we go. Perfect. What do you got here for Irene? What's the third one?
Weekly action items agreed upon.
Love it. And then Shara, what are we doing here?
Performance reviewed.
That's right. Every week, right? And then we figured out that path forward. So to Tony's point, right? Like what comes next? Like give them that empowerment, and do we have a clear path forward afterwards? And then finally,
Obstacles discussed.
that's right. Okay. So we're going to take it one step at a time, right? There's 6 different items there. We're going to take it one step at a time. And again, I've got a form, a little weekly one-on-one form that goes all the way through this. And Tony, I know you're going to have to jump off before we get to the end. So a little teaser that I'll give you regarding the form is that your team member, the person that reports to you, actually completes it. So it's not giving you any extra work. It's empowering them to take a look at their performance each week and come to you and tell you what their plan is, what obstacles they face, and how they think they're going to overcome them in the next week. Like, that's a hack. And we'll talk more about that as we go. So let's jump into it. So clear expectations established in advance. For those that have been here or haven't been here, you know, if you know the right answer, so to speak, my right answer is, when do we first start setting expectations? This runs through the whole series that we've been through over the past 5 weeks. When do we first start setting expectations as leaders?
The beginning, for sure.
Yeah, in the job description, right? That if we have a correctly written job description, we know exactly what it is going to make that person successful in role. And so then from the interview, we're also discussing what it is that's going to make them successful in that role, right? And so this is literally clipped out of a job description that I've written in the past. And so in the job description, it tells them what they're going to need to do, how they're going to need to do it, what their top 20% activities are going to be, and then all the other little things that they might have to do, right? Their other 80% of their job. And so if we know what their top 20% are, and we're going to hold them accountable to that top 20%, we're going to tell them in the job description, we're going to tell them in the interview. Okay, after job description and interview, when do we tell them what it is, the crystal clear communication on what it is that we need them to do to set the expectations? Oops, just gave it away. All right, sorry, my bad. So in the orientation, right, we're going to give them documentation that says over the next 30, 60, 90 days, over the next 100 days, these are the things that we're going to check off to make sure that you are comfortable in your role. And if at any point in our weekly conversations, you're not holding up your end of the deal and you're not staying on pace, we'll look at whether or not that's on us because we don't have a trainer here. Maybe the trainer was sick for a week, or if that's on you because you're just not keeping up. And if you're not keeping up, maybe this isn't a good fit for you, right? And what I found is when we tell everybody from the beginning all the different things that they need to do to be successful, and weekly are going through and talking to them about their progress and how well it is that they're doing with their steps along the way to be successful, even if they don't make it, they're usually thanking us for giving them a shot. And all of a sudden, the conversation just became more fun. When you have people thanking you for working hard and doing everything that you needed to do in order to help them be successful and give them all the ways to be successful, and then they don't end up being successful, even though you pour it into them, they understand it's just not a fit. And sometimes by then you like them enough that you might be able to see another fit for them in the company somewhere else, right? If 90 days in, you know that they shouldn't be a business development person for you, but maybe they should be a cook, then we switch them, right? Like larger companies have more options to do that. But any questions or conversations, thoughts on 30, 60, 90 or setting expectations in the interview before we move into number 2? All right. That was kind of a no-brainer. I know you guys knew I was coming with that one originally. So perfect. So then SMART goals established. Who here understands what a SMART goal is?
Has to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound.
And I like, realistic and attainable to me sound very similar. What's the difference between realistic and attainable?
Attainable is something that it's not that much, it's not that less. But yeah, how about you? How do you like?
Well, no, and so I changed the R because I can't figure it out. I'm not that smart.
Mm.
There, I'm not that smart with SMART goals. I am smart because I'm perfect. The truth is, though, there's a few different things that people put into SMART goals. So everybody is going to answer that question just a little bit different. Most of us say specific. Most of us say measurable. I do like A being attainable, right? So can we hit the goal? Is it something we're able to do? And then I change R to be relevant. And so the reason I say that is because sometimes when we're setting goals, we set goals that literally don't carry us forward to success inside of the big picture for the company. And if the goal has nothing to do with what the big goal is for the company or the individual, then why are we even giving them this goal, right? So is this goal relevant to the bigger picture? That's what I like R to be. And then T is what?
Time bound.
That's right, time bound. Do we have a date set for this to be completed by? Is this by next week? Is it by the end of the month? Is it by the end of the quarter? Again, 30, 60, 90. We understand that the goals inside of the 90-day need to be done by 90 days, right? 100-day passport should be completed by when?
100.
That's right. And by the 100th day, right? That's the idea. If we do all this by 100 days, we should be on the right track to being successful. So if we set people up and set SMART goals on items, so now we're looking at each week taking the 30, 60, 90 and breaking it down into their weekly meeting on what do you need to do this week to be successful. And then after the 100 days, we're continuing that process because does success stop at 100 days? No, of course not, right? We each have to keep doing things ongoing to be successful in the role. And if we stop having ongoing conversations, just like with the airplane that's making the adjustments, we stop having ongoing conversations, all of a sudden it might start going a different direction, right? So, great. Now, here's the question for everybody out there. We've identified that we need SMART goals. We've identified after the 100 days, we have to keep having these conversations. So where are we writing down these goals in such a way that we all have a clear understanding of what it is that we need to do?
For me, it should be something somewhere visible that you can really see. Let's say, for example, you have a whiteboard beside your table or office that you can really see. For me,
I could show you guys my desk. My desk has a bunch of these things because I've got 3 whiteboards in my office, right? And I'm thinking about adding a 4th, but because the 3 get filled. I've got one, my desk is a whiteboard, and then you see the big one over here, right? So usually the big one I'm writing on every time I'm having client conversations. I'm talking to them and I'm just, jotting down ideas to come back to. The desk is my check off and wipe off as I get them complete. But then I want others to know that I'm also doing what we agreed upon in advance, right? Shara, you and I talk about things. And when I tell you I'm going to do something, I put that on our scorecard, right? It's your scorecard. But I told you that I would do this because I know that you need it to be done in order for you to be able to accomplish your next step. And so I'll put down my commitment to you on your scorecard. So that way we all know that in order for Shar to be successful, I need to do something for you. And then you will also put down your, we talk about the activities that you need to do and keep those in a conversation confirmer inside of our weekly conversation scorecard, right? Yeah, so we write them down. We write them down someplace that's shared, someplace that's visible. Personally, we write them down in order so that way we can go through and check it off and look at it somewhere in our face. Now, one thing I did find out about goals, if you write them down and put them in your face, they should be the goal for the week. When you write down long-term goals and you put them somewhere where you see them all the time, eventually you start to ignore them. Because just like a stop sign, you stop there after a little bit of time, and eventually you just stop looking at the stop sign, right? A warning sign on the side of something or other. Like, most of us know we shouldn't blow dry our hair while taking a shower, but it's been a long time since I've read that tag on a hair dryer, right? Is that fair? So, that being said, let's talk about how we, these weekly action items that we agreed upon. We're going to revisit, we're going to evaluate, we're going to plan for them. We're going to write them down, just like we just talked about. Here's a hack. Can't tell you how many times this hack has saved me, right? When you and I talk about a dog, what do we find out?
We have different preference.
We have different we think of a dog differently, right?
Mm.
So you and I think about a dog differently. So when I tell somebody you need to clean this place up, do you think their definition of clean this place up and my definition of clean this place up are the same, right? If I tell somebody, hey, I need you to jump in and update the database, do you think my definition of update the database and this new employee that's only been working with me for 60 days, their definition of update the database is the same thing? No. Even if they've been working for me for 100 days, there's a chance it's not the same thing, right? Because I wasn't very specific in that item. And so if I ask you to do something, a lot of times I would do this in store visits. You have 30 different stores at GameStop. And so if I was going in, like I could write as many notes as I wanted to write. And I did take notes. But if I handed them the notes, what do you think the odds are that they would understand exactly what I wrote down for me to have an understanding of what they needed to do? If we can't even get dog right, if we can't even understand the word clean, if clean is different for everybody, if dog is different for everybody, what are the odds that I hand them a page of notes and they're going to know exactly what it is I want them to do? Pretty small, right? Not very big odds. They're probably going to mess that up. So how do you, I guarantee it's right here on the screen. How do you think I can understand better what they understood about our conversation?
Write down the expectations.
Have them write it down, right? If they're the one writing down what it is that they need to do, what they need to complete, what we talked about in our conversation, and then I would have them email that to me, right? I mean, these days Google Docs exist. They can put it right into the Google Doc or the Google Sheet. But if they're emailing me what they said or putting it in such a way that I can see what they said about our meeting, then I can read over it and ensure we had an understanding, right? Because if I go back and I read what they said for clean, we're going to clean this place up. We're going to mop the floor in the bathroom. We're going to dust the top shelves of this product rack, right? There's stacks and stacks of paperwork. I'm going to get all that put away and filed away underneath each of my clients' names in our box, right? Like all the things, right? We get all these pop buys that, you know, people were going to come pick up and they hadn't, or we haven't delivered them yet. I'm going to do this and do that and put it into storage, right? Like if they're identifying all the little elements of clean because we had a conversation, then I can know, hey, we hit it. And then I could compare it to my notes and say, yo, Jose, what's up, man? You said you were going to do this too, and you didn't put it on your list. Did you already get it done? Did you forget about it? What's the deal? Fair? Sorry to pick on you, Jose. You're not here to defend yourself, so it was easy. Anyway. All right. So performance reviewed. Let's talk about what we're doing to review the performance. So now we've established the goals. We've identified what needs to be done this week to achieve the goal and how we're going to keep moving forward to be successful. How do we review performance? So what about you all? How are you tracking your performance?
For us, it's really the numbers, Jeff. Right? The output.
Right, exactly. The output. It's and often it's the leading indicator numbers. Sometimes it's the lagging, and sometimes it's both, right? Because if I'm checking in weekly, again, I'm checking course. The small items I'm doing daily and weekly are going to turn into what? The big successes, right? The wins, the bell dings, the little things that we do add up and translate and convert into the big things. So how are we tracking the little things and how are we tracking the big things, right? How are we tracking the big goals? If I was just tracking the big goal, I think the odds are that I'm doing the right little things to hit the big goal if I'm never talking about the little things. My definition of dog is different, right?
Yes.
You know, in order to keep my dog clean, a Labradoodle and a Labrador are two very different creatures. Labrador, just, you know, take them out back and hose them off on occasion. Labradoodle, you got to take to the groomer, you know, so get them shampooed, cut, all that other kind of fun stuff. So how are we tracking? One of the great ways to track that I use regularly, and I've been using this literally even all the way back to Chuck E. Cheese, because we have to track performance. So all the way from the very beginning of my management career, we track performance in one way or another. It was sales volume, number of clients, right? Number of units sold, whatever it might be. average dollars per transaction, average catering orders, right? We're going through every single day, sometimes every hour, depending on the size of the company and their volume, tracking performance to understand our business better and what we need to do to modify it to move forward. So how are you tracking? Where are you tracking it? Who is it visible to? All very important questions you all should be answering and writing down. Fair? Okay. Path forward determined. So now we've talked about the weekly action items. We've set up the steps that we need to do. We've reviewed the performance and looked at the numbers. The next step is what? What do we do after we've done all those things? I thought that was going to come up one at a time. Like, you know, like the cool little animations, click, and did not. I just gave everybody a cheat, but I went back away from it. So people watching this on YouTube can rewind. You all aren't that lucky. So, what do we do once we've determined, once we've reviewed performance? What do we need to know?
Is it something, is it really working, or are we achieving it?
That's right. Right. What was the goal? What was our result? What's the gap? Right. Did we achieve it or did we miss it? You know, what's the difference between here and there? What's the difference between San Francisco and LA? Right. How do we got to change it in order to make sure we're going the right direction? Veer 3 degrees to the east, right? You know, north, I guess it would be me, but veer 3 degrees to the north. I'll edit that other one out. I'm just kidding. So if we're veering 3 degrees to the north, the only way we know that is if we've looked at where we're at, right? We got to know what our goal was. We got to know where we're at, and we got to know what we need to do to change to get there. And so what's the gap? How are we going to close the gap? Do we need to do something differently? Do we need to do more of the same thing? I don't know. How are we going to close the gap? Here we go. Finally, obstacles discussed, right? Jeff, I know I need to do more, but man, I keep running. I've got all this, my calendar is so packed. You keep putting more and more on my plate. Literally had a person working for me just break down crying one time when I added something to her plate that I thought was a fairly easy task. And it was, I mean, in my opinion, a fairly easy task. But she had so many other big tasks on her plate weekly that to hear that she had to get this new, easier task, it just all of a sudden, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, they say, right? Like the camel was fine, but also we just added that one more thing. It wasn't the one straw that broke the camel's back. It was all the other straws that were combined, and then we added the one. And so if we know that our people are running into issues on completing the expectations that we've given to them, are we helping to figure out what obstacle they've run into and how to get past the obstacle? That's something I can do to help. That's something somebody else on the team can do to help. Or is that something that we shouldn't even be asking them to worry about at all, right? And that's what we did. The one gal, we jumped in and we looked at her calendar and all the things that we were doing, and we took an item off of her plate and just threw it away. We've gone through this in other calls before, right? It's automate, delegate, eliminate, right? It's what things can we automate that you're already doing and now we have a better solution? What things can we delegate to somebody else because you don't have the time to get certain things done, or maybe they're outside of your skill set? What can we eliminate and take off? That's one of the first things that we look at in order to start to overcome obstacles. So tell me about a big obstacle you faced recently and how a discussion helped you to overcome that obstacle. Go ahead, both of you.
Me, my weekly challenge, to be honest, Jeff, is those leads that I'm trying to follow up. It's very I know that we had a great conversation before. However, they are unresponsive. So I've been trying to reach out to them every single week. Actually, like thrice a week sometimes, but they're not really responding. So what I'm actually really doing right now is that I'm asking help from Ree. She's actually a support for the calls
Yeah,
and to reach out. So there's gonna be another number for us to use to reach out to those clients.
great. There you go. So enlisting help from others to provide some support to get past the people that you're working on reaching and haven't been able to. Great. Love that, right? Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say. Perfect. Irene, so what obstacle have you run into and how did the discussion surrounding it help you get past it recently?
For me, it will be the additional task outside the job description. So what we do is, the trio meet first to check if it's still doable within the hours of the cyberbacker, or if it's, the cyberbacker still can do that, or still the scope of the job description. So after that, once we already gather the information, discuss about it, that's the time that, we are meeting the cyberbacker to discuss the issue that he or she has with the
Yeah.
with the task.
Love it. Good. So you and the trio discussing it together, able to come up with what you all need to do to move forward in order to help the future client or the current client be more successful with their cyberbacker, right? Which is also setting expectations, which takes us back to the beginning, right? Great. And so this is the easy question for leaders, by the way, is if you run into obstacles with your team, and you have them outline what it is that they need to do, and they come to you and tell you the obstacles that they're running into. One easy question to help determine how you can help. A lot of times your team members will say, well, I don't actually need any help. And, talking it through with you is help enough, right? I see what I need to do now. And other times, I know, Shar, you asked us to reach out to some of those unresponsive leads too, right? So again, that's that teamwork. Well, actually, it'd be great if you could get a different number calling. So can you reach out to a few of these names? I haven't been able to get in touch with them for a while. Perfect. Absolutely. 5 names, 5 calls. I can take half an hour to help you with that this week, right? Love it. What can I do to help? Or as a leader, if I didn't want to pick up those calls, I could still easily take them and give them to somebody else that might have more time on my team, but still accomplishes the same thing. Gives Shara an opportunity to use somebody like Ree to then follow up with clients that you're really working hard to get in touch with. Love it. Great. Perfect. So here's the big reminder as we start coming to the end here. The big reminder is, again, as the leaders, we are ultimately responsible for our people's success. We're ultimately responsible for holding them accountable. And we don't have to feel punitive when we're holding them responsible, right? We literally don't need to walk into those conversations feeling as if they didn't hit their goal, that it's going to be a punishment. Why the last question on this is, how can I help, right? We didn't hire them expecting that they were going to be some miracle cure for a problem in our business, right? Business is not traditionally full of miracle cures. It's full of consistent, monotonous hard work, right? Like, it's doing the same thing for time in order to be successful. And so if somebody that's working for us is having a hard time being successful, doing the same thing time after time, then we might need to shift our system or our process. Might need to have a better conversation, help them work through something until it clicks. And in the end, ultimately, it's up to us to be responsible. But if we are there to lift our people up through conversations surrounding their performance and their activities and their goals, then the conversation can actually be a lot more fun. Speaking of fun surrounding conversations, there is this Take 5 sheet that I promised and this Take 7 sheet that I promised in the beginning and several times throughout the call today that we're going to lend to you. So what's the big difference between a Take 5 and a Take 7? And this is why I said, speaking of fun. So the Take 5 runs through everything that we just talked about, right? What was the goal last week? What were your results? What is your goal for this week? What's your strategy to accomplish the goal? And then anything getting in your way, another word for obstacles, right? And then how can I help? Perfect, right? So additional thoughts surrounding it, all that other kind of stuff. So if you have your person on your team filling this sheet out before they come and have a conversation with you, and you all are doing this every night, by the way. Like, I mentioned that we're not using this sheet necessarily in our one-on-ones, but you send an end of week and end of day report that tells us what obstacles you've run into throughout the day, right? It tells us what your successes were throughout the day. So we know every single day what your success was, what your result was, what your goal was, and how you're looking for help inside of our team. So that's perfect. But this sheet specifically is a conversation surrounding those exact things. So then when we get together weekly to have a conversation with you to figure out what it is, we can know what you're running into, all right? The big difference between the Take 5 and the Take 7, I realized as I started to grow up a little bit and not just be super performance driven, everybody's got to hit their goal or die, right? Like, I've been really successful over the years. And over the years, sometimes I would lose successful people. And a lot of times when I go back after having lost somebody that was successful, a lot of times what it came down to was, Jeff, you're great. Jeff, I love winning with you. You know, all that other stuff was great. You're very, and I just didn't feel like I was hitting my goals. Well, what were your goals? And I realized, wait a minute, I probably shouldn't be asking them that question after they've left the company. How did I not know what their goal was while they were working for me? And so that's what the Take 7 adds in. The Take 7 adds in, what is a personal goal of yours for this week, right? Now, in many companies, you can't require an employee to share. One of the best ways for somebody that works for you to share a personal goal of theirs is you to share a personal goal of yours with them. Is that fair? So if I'm telling people things that I'd like to achieve personally and in my life and with my family, big goals that I've got for the future of my life, big things that I'd love to see and accomplish, then guess what? More often than not, somebody on your team is willing to share a dream with you. And if we can know what their personal goals are, then we can also help them to achieve those and have that conversation weekly. And that's why it's a Take 5 to a Take 7, because would you imagine that having a conversation about somebody's personal goal might take a couple minutes longer? In fact, I've thought about changing this to a Take 10, because a lot of times with our personal goals, we have a little bit more excitement and we chit chat about them a little bit more, right? And that's okay. In fact, I usually like a weekly one-on-one to take about a half hour. And if you can't fit a half hour in because you've got 30 employees that answer to you or whatever the case may be, and that's not always reasonable, the Take 5 and the Take 7 are literally meant to just be that. Take 5 minutes, have this conversation. It's 5 questions, a minute a question-ish, and some thoughts and stuff around it. Could you take 5 minutes each week with each of your people to help make sure that they're successful? I think so, right? Could you take 7 minutes with each of your people to add in an element of figuring out what they'd like to do to accomplish that big goal of theirs personally? If it was a personal goal, that you could help them connect with their business goal. If you achieve these things inside your business, these are the things you're able to accomplish personally. If you could add that personal goal in, or even just from an accountability standpoint from you to them, helping to push them to achieve something fun inside their personal life, like how much better would that be if they could look back and say, yeah, that manager of mine, that leader of mine, way back in my early days, if she hadn't taken the time to find out about these goals and encourage me to achieve them each week, I might never have done it. So, a little bit of my soapbox for today. How do we do?
Great.
What questions do we have?
Yeah.
All right. So next week, it's how to develop people on your team. What is that? What does nurturing look like? How can you help them reach their true potential? Believe it or not, that was going to be this week. And I realized that we couldn't do that one this week until we just had the discussion that we had. Right? So initially I was like, all right, we're going to hire people, or we're going to set our vision. We're going to hire people that fit that vision. And then we're going to bring them on. We're going to train them. And then we're going to turn them into leaders. And I was like, yeah, but it's really hard to turn somebody into a leader until I understand what their vision is. And we figure out what their vision is through that Take 7 for them, right? By understanding what their personal goals are. Do they even want to be a leader? Right? Some people don't. And then you promote them and they're like, I hate this. And then they quit. It's like, okay, right? We didn't ask them. If we didn't talk about it weekly, then maybe we didn't do our job. So that's next week, nurturing potential and developing your future leaders. What questions do you all have? Anything that came up while we're going through this? All right. Well, you guys know how to reach us. We've got Marilyn at cyberbacker.com, Jeff at cyberbackermaryland.com, or Jeff at bemoreeveryday.com, whichever way you'd rather get in touch with me. And happy to answer any questions as we go. But thank everybody for your time. Have a great week.